United States, on the contrary to European countries, they are not dependent on Russian money.
I'm asking my Ukrainian friends, don't lose confidence in the United States.
This focus is kind of shifted. So this is because of China and predominance of this Chinese threat.
I mean, people here in Ukraine could say, you know, who are you to tell us to reform?
They are not built on the mutual statements on TV. It's just all about money.
Exactly.
Доброго дня, мене звати Оксана Сироїд, і сьогодні я із задоволенням хочу представити дуже цікавого гостя і співрозмовника. I would like to welcome here today Ben Hoджес. Ben now is a Persian chair in security studies at the Center for European Policy Analysis. But in Ukraine, he is known as the General Hodges, commander of U.S. Army Europe in 2014-2018. I remember when you invited me and some other MPs to Wiesbaden, the headquarters of U.S. Army Command in 2017, to the briefing of U.S. Army Command. I was impressed by the equipment, but also the moment of transparency, the moment of trust. Being the deputy speaker of the parliament, I could hardly get access to the general staff of Ukraine because it was so secret. And when we came to Wiesbaden, you opened the door. You opened the information. I almost had the tears of my, and all this chain of command reporting to you about the situation. I was moved first by the model, how it can be, and the moment of trust.
When I saw you, first of all, I automatically would be respectful of your position as a senior parliamentarian. I mean, to me, it was completely natural. The deputy speaker of the Rada, of course, you would be like the deputy to Nancy Pelosi, for example. My instinct was to be transparent with you, whether you are Ukrainian, American, German. I did the same thing. But on a personal note, you had earned my trust also because I had seen you in Yavoriv on a terrible weather day out with your rain jacket, walking around talking to Ukrainian soldiers, exactly the way I've seen American members of Congress talk to their soldiers. So you had earned my confidence. If the military is going to share, here's the map, here's what we're doing, here's the status of our forces, then that's a real responsibility for the politician not to give away things that are not appropriate for public dissemination.
People in Ukraine, they definitely know you and they remember you coming here, being a commander of U.S. Army Europe, coming to Ukraine, and very vocally, publicly, supporting Ukrainian soldiers, supporting Ukrainian officers, supporting generally Ukraine as a state, even more than a lot of politicians, for example. Why? What was so important? What it was all about?
I think that the history and the culture and the people of Ukraine are special. It's unique. So that inspired me. I met so many quality young women and young men in Ukrainian armed forces, but also I met people like you. I met journalists that really cared about the freedom and sovereignty of Ukraine. And then on a strategic level, when I look at the map, it's obvious how important Ukraine is, not as a buffer state, but as a nation on the Black Sea for the economic prosperity of much of Europe as well as security. So it makes sense to support Ukraine's effort to be strong, to be resilient, and to push back on Russian aggression.
Сильна Україна! Та всі вже давно втомилися від України. Постійно знаю якісь проблеми. Ще й санкції їм подавай.
As long as I remember you, you've been emphasizing on the Black Sea. The time when a lot of people, especially in Europe, and a lot of politicians, and even here in Ukraine, they speak about this, they see the content line. This aggression is very much localized. Even Crimea, in a lot of senses, is lost from this focus. You, on the contrary, for many, many years, you are emphasizing that if somebody wants to understand the role of Ukraine and the strategy, security strategy in this region, you have to put the map with the Black Sea in the middle of the table. So what's about this Black Sea in the middle?
So in most European headquarters, NATO, U.S. Army, but other European countries as well, the Black Sea and Turkey are down in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. And so it affects how you think about the area. But if you slide the Black Sea up into the middle of the map, and then you realize how important the Black Sea is for East-West economic relationships between Europe and Eurasia. If you could bring products from China, for example, across Eurasia through Azerbaijan and Georgia, and then across the Black Sea into Ukraine or to the Danube in Romania or down through the Bosphorus, this would bring so much prosperity to the region. And of course, that's the last thing that the Kremlin wants, is for Georgia to become prosperous or for Romania to become prosperous, because then German, Dutch, British, French business will begin to invest. And when they begin to invest, then the Bundestag starts asking questions. Why are there so many Russian soldiers in Georgia? Why are there so many Russian soldiers in Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia? And then Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, it becomes impossible to ignore. Also, all of the problems that Russia has caused in Syria and the Eastern Mediterranean and North Africa, this is only possible because of Crimea.
The use of Crimea as the base.
It is the launching pad for everything that they've done. If you think about Syria, only with Kremlin support is the Assad regime still in power. And the Assad regime, the civil war, sent more than 3 million refugees into Turkey and into Europe. This was not an accident. This is weaponization of refugees by the Kremlin to destabilize Europe.
Why the leadership of the countries is so reluctant to look for the alternatives for this region?
Countries that have been under the thumb of the Kremlin from the time of the czars up until now, they know what it's like. But if you're a little bit further to the west, in Berlin, in Paris, in Brussels, it's like, what's the problem? What's the threat? Those countries do not believe that the Kremlin really is the threat. They choose not to see it. And frankly, I think there is so much money, Russian money, that is in banks and financial institutions or in real estate in London. You know, people joke about London as the London Oblast. And of course, Germany is completely beholden, unfortunately, to the Kremlin. Nord Stream 2 is only a part of this. It's terrible, but that's just a part. The French, I think, would be willing to give away Ukraine and Georgia in a minute to maintain a relationship with the Kremlins.
Подумаєш, а що тут такого? Треба взагалі більше з Росією працювати, треба її демократизувати, а не війною йти і санкції накладати.
And now a lot of people feel, and I think not only in Ukraine, that the United States, they are kind of abandoning this part of the world and Europe in general. Europe that actually was built as it is with the help of the United States after the Second World War. I would like to maybe to elaborate a little bit on what would be the kind of the worst scenario if the United States withdraw from Europe, from the Black Sea region, and on the contrary, what we see as the best scenarios.
During the time of the Obama administration, well, even if you go back to the time of the Bush administration, when President Bush, he said, I could see the soul of Putin. We were naive. The Obama administration was not tough on the Kremlin. And then certainly the Trump administration was a catastrophe. And now the Biden administration also does not appear to be willing to really...
And this is very interesting because, in fact, United States, on the contrary to European countries, they are not dependent on Russian money.
Right. I am very disappointed that we have seemed to have lost our way a little bit. But the United States has been through much worse before. We had a civil war where almost 1 million people were killed 160 years ago. We have dealt with slavery. We just finished a 20-year war in Afghanistan. And then our own society, American society, is very divided right now because of COVID, because of politics, because of race issues. And that weakens our position as a leader and our moral authority. You know, there's another set of elections that will take place next November for every member of the House of Representatives and 1/3 of the senators. And so, democracy is not a ballet. It is a fight all the time. And so I'm confident that eventually, over the next few years, you're going to see some leaders, centrists from both sides, that are going to help us get back on path. I'm asking my Ukrainian friends, don't lose confidence in the United States. Acknowledge that we're not perfect. Our path is imperfect, but it's still the United States. And there are too many people that care about it to let it just completely come apart. But it's hard. Of course, the Kremlin exploits this. Instead, I think that the United States and Ukraine have got to strengthen our bilateral relationship. Right now, in Washington, if people hear Ukraine, they think of Giuliani, Trump, Hunter Biden's laptop, corruption, things like that. And I suspect right now, many Ukrainians, when they hear U.S., they think of Trump, Giuliani not helping us. That's unfortunately. So we've got to get a relationship that is a normal relationship, strong diplomatic ties. And look, we've had some of our best ambassadors have served here. I remember Jeff Pyatt, one of the best professional diplomats we've ever had. Others have served here. So it's not like we haven't had good diplomats and that we don't send quality people here, but it's got to be more than just the embassy, of course. It's the whole range of diplomatic relationships, cultural relationships, education, exchanges, and economic ties. I mean, people here in Ukraine could say, who are you to tell us to reform when you have so many problems of your own in the United States? And here I do agree with President Biden that our foreign policy depends on a strong domestic policy. Otherwise, we don't have the credibility or legitimacy.
I agree.
You chose a better English word than I did.
I'm a lawyer. Just the only reason. But still, this focus is kind of shifted. So is it because of China and predominance of this Chinese threat, or what would you describe as a reason?
Well, for sure, the United States is increasingly focusing on the Indo-Pacific region, on China as the long-term threat, economic, diplomatic, but also militarily. And the tensions over Taiwan are more and more every day. And I think there is a very real possibility that we will be in a kinetic conflict with China inside 5 years. I hope I'm wrong, obviously, but I think it's a very real possibility. And so the United States is working with Australia, India, Japan, UK, Philippines, South Korea to strengthen our ability to contain China, to prevent a conflict from happening. But we don't have a strategy in place yet that also addresses the economic. I mean, we are so dependent on China for so many things. But so is Germany, so is France, so is UK. So the United States has got to work closely with allies in Europe and in the Pacific to force them to live up to diplomatic or international law and diplomatic practices, respect sovereignty.
But Chinese, they must have learned from Russian experience that
The Chinese see that we, the West, have not done anything to punish the Kremlin for its invasion of Georgia, its support for the Assad regime, and of course, the invasion of Ukraine and the seizure of Crimea, killing Ukrainian soldiers every week. The Kremlin is at war all the time. That, whether it's military, the use of gas as a weapon, the use of disinformation as a weapon, giving passports to anybody, and then drafting them into the army. The Chinese see this, and they see us also with our disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. The Chinese Communist Party exploits this. But Russia remains an existential threat to the United States, to Europe, and obviously to Ukraine. The United States is not leaving Europe. The number of Navy ships in Europe, the U.S. has moved drones into Romania. So there's actually been an increase in military presence and capability in Europe, even during the time of President Trump.
you also been very vocal in protecting Ukrainian military. For example, I was really amazed and I appreciated a lot your public statement about General Nazarov. This is for those who are not aware. The case was about the aircraft, the Il-76, that was shot down by Russians in 2014, and General Nazarov, who was one of the commander in the region, he was sentenced to, I don't remember, 7 years or something like this.
Well, there was also Ambassador Herbst and Ambassador Vershbow. There were several people that were concerned about this case.
But first your statement, and then later on few others, was emphasizing that it's not right approach. And in Ukrainian society, it's still not clear where is the borderline, between the crime, the responsibility of the military for the orders, and where is the part of the war, of the war component.
My concern about the case with General Nazarov was that the military has a separate judicial process, is because it recognizes that here's a body that is given the authority by the state to use force to kill enemies of the country. So this is a very unique authority. So a huge responsibility to be very careful when you do that, but also the lives of your soldiers are your responsibility. The nature of war is uncertainty. You never have perfect information, no matter how many satellites, no matter how many computers, no matter how many drones. And so a commander has to make decisions without perfect information. And these decisions affect the lives of people, and they affect the security of a nation. So Ukraine, just like the United States, needs officers who are willing to take a risk, to make a decision based on their best judgment without perfect information. And I was worried that in this case, here General Nazarov made a decision based on his best information, trying to help soldiers that were trapped in a combat situation that needed help.
As the court mentioned, it was the wrong order.
The aircraft was shot down. But if officers see that then go to prison, if there's ever a mistake, well, then you can be sure they will stop making decisions. They will avoid liability. You cannot fight a war like that, especially against an opponent like Russian Federation forces. Of course, we should all be held accountable. And Ukraine, like every country, has a responsibility to provide the best possible education for their officers, professional military education, than just teaching someone how to drive a tank or fly an airplane or fire rockets. Not training, education, so that they have the mental capacity, the intelligence to be able to think through challenging situations, imperfect or lack of perfect information, and to think critically about what's being done. That's what you need as an officer corps. That's a different type of education system. And I would encourage Ukrainian armed forces to continue along that path without benefit of air power, without benefit of sea power, without benefit of allies on the ground with you. You stopped Russian Federation forces. And I think that the women and men deserve the absolute support of and thanks of their country. And the way that the country can show their thanks is to make sure that they are paid properly, that the families of soldiers are cared for. If a soldier is wounded, especially if it's something for the rest of his life, that they are cared for, and that society values service by women and men in the armed forces. This is the best way to say thanks. And then the last point I would make, the role of the Rada to have oversight of where all the money goes, of the defense budget. Is the taxpayer getting what they're paying for? Do the soldiers have the best equipment? This is accountability, and that requires more transparency.
Та Україна то найбільш корумпована країна в Європі. Політики он тільки гроші лопатою гребуть. Як взагалі тут щось розбудовувати?
And this is very difficult to explain here to people in Ukraine. Excluding politicians from this process just worsened the situation and worsened the politicians themselves as well.
In the U.S. Constitution, civilian control over the military is a pillar. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the authority for oversight and gives Congress the authority to provide the budget to the military, which means that the military has to explain where the money is and how we're using it and to answer questions of the Congress. That doesn't give the Congress control over the military, but it gives the Congress oversight responsibility. The Congress is demanding that the military get the best equipment, the best uniform, the best health care for soldiers, and also so that they can be successful on their task. And then Article 2 of the Constitution says that the president is the commander-in-chief. So the military has to respond to commander-in-chief, but also to the Congress. And so this is a manifestation of the checks and balances of executive, legislative, and court. That's the principle. But military is not the only part of security. This is where we have to increase our economic investment. And so I would ask Ukraine, what are you doing to make investment by American business, German business, British business more attractive?
All places attractive for investments, they are occupied by the oligarchs, so it's very difficult to squeeze in.
So why would a U.S. business not want to invest in Ukraine? It's because they are worried about their lack of transparency. They don't know if their money will be protected. They don't trust that in a court case that they would be able to get back something that was taken.
And this is the design, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so if you want to get American investment, and Ukraine has so much to offer, you've got a large, talented, intelligent, young population. I mean, I've seen so many young people in Ukraine that are ready to work in different industries. And I think that you have strategic minerals,
Yes.
Resources that I would much rather us depend on Ukraine than on China for some of these strategic materials. So I think Ukraine has the opportunity to invite more investment, which will then help with its security.
I do agree that we have to become attractive for the trade and for the investment. Otherwise, we cannot build security alliances, because security alliances, they are built on interest, mutual interest,
Right.
on money.
Exactly.
They are not built on this mutual statements on TV. It's just all about money. Until we become interested and open for the investment, we will be just on this borderline of civilization.
I keep emphasizing the importance of attracting business. Let's make this strong so that it's the kind of relationship that can withstand the normal political challenges that come and go, and build more trust. I think that's got to be job one.
And I cannot avoid asking about NATO and regional alliances. Otherwise, people would not forgive me. Everybody wants to know what General Hodges think about Ukraine's perspective in NATO, and also, but you know, even though it's very important for Ukraine, the NATO aspiration, like meeting all NATO standards and requirements, and of course, I believe that NATO would benefit a lot from getting Ukraine into the alliance.
Та. НАТО хоче тут воювати з Росією руками українців, грузинів, чорногорців, а на нас їм начхати.
Look, I absolutely believe that Ukraine should be in NATO, that Georgia should be in NATO, and I will continue to advocate for that. I believe that one day it's going to happen, but I don't put a date of 5 years, 10 years, or whatever for Ukraine or for Georgia. NATO is the most successful alliance in the history of the world. There's a reason that countries are in a queue wanting to join NATO. Nobody is knocking on the door of the Kremlin saying, I want to come back in. Nobody. But the alliance is not perfect, of course. It has had to adapt to the different challenges. The next NATO summit is in Madrid in June next year. And the alliance will adopt a new strategic concept. You remember the last strategic concept talked about Russia as a partner. Obviously, it's not. And so now the alliance is adapting to the reality of the current security environment and what we anticipate for the next decade. You know, our relationship with Turkey right now is not in a good place. Turkey is an essential ally. I don't even want to think about NATO without Turkey. So we've got to rebuild trust there. Perhaps the growing relationship between Turkey and Ukraine and Turkey and Poland can help U.S. and Turkey find ways to regain trust in each other as well. So Ukraine has a responsibility of its own, and it has responsibility as part of a region.
But I understand the whole politics around. So I would like to maybe elaborate a bit, not only about the NATO itself, but also about the strengthening of regional cooperation, because I think that we can just concentrating on some big goal, we can miss a lot of opportunities around.
Mm-hmm. That is a great point. You know, so much focus on NATO membership rather than all the things that need to happen before that. Think also that Ukraine has to work more closely with its neighbors in the Black Sea region. I think Ukraine, Romania, Georgia, Turkey working together could attract more attention to the Black Sea region in Washington, in Brussels, in London, in Berlin, by working together. In Washington and in Brussels, everybody knows where Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are. Every member of Congress could find Latvia on a map. And it's because those three countries have been so loud and so active, and they've worked together in Washington to explain why it matters.
I do agree, and thank you very much for your service and for such long-standing advocacy for Ukraine. I'm sure that you will do your best, and I will always help you. Thank you so much.
Well, you are proof, you and so many other people I've met through you are proof that you can serve your country without wearing a uniform. And there are a lot of ways to serve Ukraine and to help strengthen society. And the program that you're starting at the Kiev School of Economics, for example, to help develop a pool of young professionals that are interested in statecraft, that are interested in good governance, that are interested in developing security policy. That is a real contribution to Ukrainian security.
Thank you very much. Ми мали чудову розмову з генералом Беном Ходжесом, великим другом України, який, на відміну від багатьох, має неймовірну кількість позитивних ідей для України і для співпраці з Україною. Дякую, що залишаєтеся з нами.